Okay, so here I have a mushroom, and if I want to paint it or do anything to it, then I have to unwrap it first and give it material, and then I can paint it. So let me go back to editing, UV editing here, and look at the mushroom. Well, how can I create a net out of a mushroom? So there's a few places that you kind of want to get started when you are marking your seams. And for this example, I would say let's create a seam here around the stem, when the stem turns into the cap. So select that whole edge, right click, mark seam. Okay. If I press A now and I just unwrap this like it is, you can see, okay, I do get a net. And, you know, even without visualizing this, we should kind of know, like, this isn't really good enough. Like, there's going to be some issues here. But I want to show you what these issues would look like. Like, if this is all I do, what would the unwrap kind of do? If all I have is this, the little stem, and I want to flatten into a 2D plane, there must be some stretching, right? That's the only way I can actually bring this down. I can flatten it. So I want to show you the stretching and what that really looks like. So I'm going to create a new material, but for the base color, I'm going to get something called checker texture, and I want to feed it this UV coordinates. You don't have to worry about why this is happening. Just look at the mushroom here. And I'll change the scale down. So ideally, for you to know when you have a good UV unwrap, every single part of this mushroom would kind of look like a checkered texture. But you can see down here, the checker texture is just like warped and distorted, which is not good, which means that these faces here, when I UV unwrap it, all of these faces are being squashed, right? So if I select these faces, you can see, okay, those faces represent all of these things, and they're just being squashed. They need to all be even. So how can I do a better job here? Well, I'm gonna take this line right here, and I'm gonna say that I'm going to cut a seam right there as well. Mark seam. And then I'm also going to mark a seam around the base here. Mark seam. Press A, unwrap. Okay, and now look at our little texture. So the stem looks pretty good. You can see the little seams here as well, which is a whole topic of its own. How do we kind of take care of the seams, because they'll cause some issues. And if you remember the PowerPoint in class, these seams causing issues here, it's the same reason why in my PowerPoint these things happened. So this line right here, that would be a seam. Same with this line here and this line here. So the artist put seams in a position that you shouldn't normally put them. You probably want to put them in places that you can't see. So in this example, if you had rope, I would put the seam behind where the wood would cover it, or I would put it upside down, like right below it, because if you're playing a game, you're going to be looking from top down most likely, so you wouldn't see the seam below, but they put the seam on top. So we have a seam there, and we still need to kind of fix the cap. So same thing with the cap. You can, like, it's really more of an art than a science, putting seams. Like, you can check, like, I put a seam here, I'm going to unwrap everything, see what it looks like. Okay, it's pretty consistent. Here it's quite small, here it's quite big, so maybe it's not the greatest. I can take that seam away. I can also make a seam here, and this is kind of what we get. And so here they're still a little bit smaller here compared to this. It's not the size of the square here that matters. Like, it's not if it's small here and big here, it's the inconsistency of it. So say this is a good unwrap. I'm happy with this. If this was in a game, your character would probably see the mushroom from like way back here, so it wouldn't really make too much of a big deal. So the last thing that kind of remains to talk about is here. So each one of these things is called an island. So if I press on one face here and I press L, that will link or select all of them that are linked. So that's an island, this is an island, and this is an island, and they all correspond to different parts. I can move these islands with G, and I can just move them around, but we want to keep all of these islands within this square. And you don't have to, and there's reasons why you wouldn't, but for everything that we'll cover right now, we want to keep them all in here. The other thing to kind of be aware of is we want to make as much use of this image, of this square, as we can. Because when we create an image texture for this mushroom, so when we create an image on the computer, 1024 or 2048 by 2048, we're already saying, okay, this is how many megabytes per image I'm going to use. So if this is my image, I want to maximize how much resolution I get. Because if all I do, I can like just scale all of these down and I can make like a 1024 by 1024 image. So let me do that real quick. And there'll be a whole new video of how to texture paint. So this part, don't worry about this part. Okay, so I have my mushroom made here and it's colored. And if I have an image on the computer that's this big, but I'm only using this much area for this mushroom, that means it's gonna get pixely, and you can kind of see the pixels here. And if I go into hand paint mode and say I want to make this top a little bit more yellow, you can see right here it's pixely, and here you can see the pixelation even better. But if I was to use more of this image, then it would be less pixely, right? So when I unwrap, I want to use up as much area as possible. Now if I was to paint this mushroom, you can see that it's much less pixely. So the more area you use, the better. For your assignments, it will be fine if you just simply press U and then unwrap them, and then whatever it gives you, it gives you. But I do want to show you that there are some add-ons here. Like I really like to use this add-on called UV Packmaster, and with a few settings here, I can ask the computer to kind of maximize the area here. And so here it tells me, okay, I'm using 56% of the image texture, and obviously I want this to be as high as I can. But this is a paid add-on, so obviously it's fine if you guys just use the default setting. Okay, so in the next video, we'll talk about how to actually color and some helpful tips and tricks about coloring, because now we have our low poly model that is fully unwrapped, it's ready to be colored, and then essentially we're almost done with the pipeline. So yeah, that's it for this video.